Prior to Charles Darwin, scientists had some rather strange ideas concerning how life began. They believed that living organisms came into being rapidly and spontaneously over a period of just a few weeks. The scientific community believed in spontaneous generation for 2,000 years. And it is a stark reminder that even a majority of scientists can be wrong. In his classic 17th century description of spontaneous generation, scientist Jan Baptist von Helmont suggested that mice came from dirty underwear.
Wanneer je een stuk gedragen ondergoed, if you put a piece of sweaty underwear in an open-mouthed jar, together with a piece of wheat, after 21 days the ferment coming out of the underwear changed the wheat into mice. But what is even more amazing is that the mice are not small or aborted mice, but adult mice emerge.
Another evidence offered for spontaneous generation was the rotting meat experiment. 17th century scientists observed that if meat was placed in an open jar, maggots formed on the meat weeks later. They conjectured that life, in the form of maggots, arose spontaneously from rotting meat. But in 1668, Francesco Redi, an Italian physician and scientist, overturned this idea. He suggested this proof of spontaneous generation was nothing more than contamination of the meat by flies. When flies landed on the rotting meat, they laid their eggs. Over time, these eggs grew into maggots. Later, the maggots changed into flies. When scientist Redi prevented flies from landing on the meat with a piece of cheesecloth, maggots never formed. A third evidence for spontaneous generation was the 19th century pond water experiment. Scientists took pond water, boiled it, and poured it into an open jar. After a few weeks, the sterilized water was now teeming with bacteria. Soon the water became cloudy. Scientists suggested this was proof of spontaneous generation, that bacteria arose spontaneously from the sterile water. They scoffed at anyone who dared to question their conclusions. In 1859, spontaneous generation was finally rejected after the French Academy of Sciences held a contest to see if anyone could definitively prove or disprove the theory. Scientist Louis Pasteur stepped forward. Pasteur theorized that cloudy water did not represent spontaneous generation, rather contamination. He suggested that bacteria in the air seeded the water in the jar. To prove this, he sterilized water in an S-shaped glass. The opened end of the glass pointed upward and allowed air in, but bacteria could only settle in the neck and were prevented from reaching the water. After months of waiting, the liquid in the flask never became cloudy. With this experiment, Pasteur disproved spontaneous generation once and for all, and this first scientific natural explanation for the origin of life collapsed. Today we can learn from the failures of the past. A scientific idea, theory, or law may be believed for thousands of years by a majority of scientists, only to be proven wrong. All scientific theories and laws should be open to scrutiny, even the theory of evolution.
It's not science unless you can question and falsify it. Unless you can say this is false, this is wrong, it's not science.
You know, scientists are just as much prone to holding on to old ideas as anyone else, and many of them are very conservative.
But there's always a chance with new evidence that we may find that there's a fundamental error in our thinking. You know, no scientist ever says never, and no good scientist ever says always.
It comes down to what you bring to the questions to begin with. If you don't want to see things, you're not going to see them, and we're all guilty of not wanting to see certain things.